This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, and this is what I call a special. This is an emergency broadcast. I have been getting phone calls all day, people who know that I am on the Trump campaign. They want inside information. And so what we're going to do right now is all the questions you have, we're going to answer tonight, all right? Right now. And my guest, I'm going to patch him in live, is Ali Alexander, who is someone I admire. He had a great cheat sheet for election night, and he was on it. And he's gonna break down what's going on. So let's call him live. We're doing this. This format's a little different because I want it up right now. Here we go.
Howdy, my friend.
Aloha, Ali. Welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, brother, it's a privilege, and thanks for coming on in the last minute. Like you, my phone has been blowing up all day with people that have questions, and but unlike you, I don't have the answers. And I think if anyone has the answers to the questions that everyone is asking, I was just watching my boy play tennis, and I was listening to all the men ask, like, what's happening? Is the election being stolen? Is this rigged? Who won Nevada? Who won Ohio? What's going on in Michigan? And I thought, you're the guy to talk to. So,
well, I'm flattered.
My first question for you, though, is, I thought I really cared about who won this election.
Mm-hmm.
But today I had a realization. I wanted Trump to win. I think Trump's what's best for America. But I don't think I really cared that much about who won this election. I think what I really cared about is how the winner won. Was it a fair and free election? And so that's my first question for you. I am horrified by the thought that we are witnessing the most brazen attempt to rob a free people of a free and fair election that has ever happened in the history of the world. And I hope I'm wrong about that. Is that what's happening right now?
I'll tell you, this has all of the markers of a South American or Eastern European coup. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. How do you close polls down in Wisconsin and Michigan at 11 or midnight, say, oh, well, we don't have the workers, and everybody wakes up at 7 or 8 a.m. only to find out that Joe Biden got 100% of the votes that were dumped in at 4 a.m. It's absolutely disgusting. They're gaslighting us. They're taking advantage of incrementalism and just saying, you guys are going to accept this. And we're looking across the country, and Jason, this looks a lot like 2018. We had issues with voter integrity and election integrity in Arizona, in Orange County, California, in Georgia, and then in Florida, where I ultimately ran an operation called Stop the Steal. And we saved Rick Scott's U.S. Senate race, and we kept DeSantis out of the runoff as they were stealing it in slow motion. So I got to tell you, I've worked 14 years in this business. You've been in this business longer than I have, trying to, be a good patriot. This doesn't look like the other elections I'm used to.
Yeah, well, you are more familiar than anyone on this stealing of elections, your Stop the Steal campaign. I find it hard to believe that my friends who are Democrats would want to win by stealing an election. But
right.
But do they care? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? I think, not to get overly philosophical, but, we're trying to tackle the question here at the end of the information age. How do you know what you know? And that's how I look at Stanley Kubrick's The Monolith. It's like, how do you know what you know? It's the beginning of things, and they change, and it radically alters your universe or your understanding of physics or however you interpret his movies. And so here we are living in a society where half the country truly believes the narrative of the Russia hoax, which is totally debunked. And then half the country understands the information that our president is not a Russian asset. And so the way I look at it is that, yeah, some of my friends who have more liberal tendencies care deeply about the same issues that I care about, and their integrity means a lot to them. But they're working their 9 to 5s. They're living their lives. And when Adam Schiff and these other liars come out and lie, they just assume, well, why would someone just lie like that? They can't be lying. And I think that that's what's happening right now, is that we don't have a shared reality. We don't have shared facts. We're not debating things. We're demonstrating things. And worse, one side is gaslighting things. And you know, that's what's happening. It's really unfortunate, too, because why is this only happening in Democrat states? Why do they always have the counting problem? Why are they always first to turn in ballots, last to turn in ballots, last to count ballots, and first to announce the results of counting the ballots?
And why, we talked about this yesterday on Taylor Marshall's show, and why has the RNC election cycle after election cycle, and why haven't they taken this serious?
You know, that's the $1,000 question, or maybe it's the $10 million question, is why don't Republicans want to talk about these issues? But it might be, Jason, the same way that the Tea Party allowed for us to talk about the Second Amendment in how it was actually drafted. It's not for hunting. You know, our party went through this weird shift probably in the late 90s, you know, before my time in the party. But where the Second Amendment's about hunting and tradition, and that's not at all the case. And thank God for 2009 and 2010, because we got to reclaim the heritage of the Second Amendment and the true meaning of it. And we got to talk about it in a way that we should be talking about it. The same with taxes. You know, we weren't talking about reducing taxes, and still we haven't, but at least we're talking about it. We were talking about, well, slowing the growth. And so in a lot of ways, I think that the Republican Party thinks that this issue sounds too wacky or controversial, or worse, it's a conspiracy theory. It's like, yes, there is a conspiracy. That's what voter fraud is. It's a criminal conspiracy to commit fraud, and worse, dilute my vote, dilute your vote, dilute the vote of the person listening to this. Voter fraud is a crime against all of us. They're not just adding to the pool, they're peeing in the pool.
Yeah, and like you said, our friends, if you're not on this, as quick as I've been looking at videos from all over the country, people were filming on their phones, the most suspicious behavior. It's pulled down as fast as you can put it up. And I don't know if you saw that Bevelyn Beatty was stabbed yesterday. Did you see that?
Oh, no. You know, I saw an image, and I thought surely, I didn't have time to click it, but I thought surely I saw something about Antifa or Proud Boys.
She was stabbed by Antifa or a member of some such group, and it's pulled down. It's pulled down. You put up, you know, if you or I, God forbid, I don't want to say it out loud, but if there were a sex tape of you or I, it would be up there forever. No one would pull it down.
Right.
If, you know, you can find street fights from 18-year-olds from 2010 on YouTube. But Bevelyn Beatty gets stabbed yesterday by some leftist organization, and they take it down as soon as you put it up. And so our family and friends just don't believe that Twitter would do that. They just don't believe that Facebook would do that. They don't believe, like, and they are not. They're such confident gaslighters because they know. I like how you put it. They're working hard. They got to get up. They got to pour their kids cereal. They got to pick up their phone and respond to the first emails of the day. Then they got to put the kids in the car. Then they got to drop them off at school. Then they got to run to the office. And then they got baseball after work, and then more work after the kids go to bed. And they're honest people, and they find it impossible to believe that there would be this kind of dishonesty, this kind of corruption. How do we reach them?
Well, I think the easiest way is to demonstrate, because I think that, like I said, I think we have left a period of time where we're no longer debating things. So, you know, society will tell us that we're shouting at each other, and sure, we are shouting at each other, but we're not in a debate. We're not in an argument. Shouting is actually a cathartic attempt to boost your morale, in which you need to justify how you're feeling and you want to leave the rational state of mind, or you got to kind of, tough yourself up to hit somebody or something like that. I mean, that's kind of the human emotions that I associate with shouting. And so I wrote a piece in American Greatness probably 6 or 7 months ago, and I said, we're in a time of demonstration. And it's exciting, but it's very scary. And so what I think that you and I have to do, Jason, is that we have to demonstrate to people that the referees are in on it. And so, my friend Michael Cernovich made a movie, Hoax. If people go to hoaxmovie.com, it's a way to red pill people that media misinformation and worse, media disinformation actually hurts the left and the right. What you'll find is that they're after the little guy. They're after the little guy. They're not after the neoliberal or the corporatist Republican. They're after the conservative who believes in family values. They're after the progressive who really believes what they say about equality. And, there's a whole philosophical debate about that, but that's what media is trying to do. They're trying to rig the frame of the argument so that their corporate advertisers win. And who are their corporate advertisers? Big pharma, big defense, the military-industrial complex. And this has really been kind of, I think, since the election of Trump, a come-to-Jesus meeting for some of us who have worked a long time in the party, thought we were pretty grassroots, but didn't realize that we ourselves were blind to some of the games that we were trapped in, that they're using us as players on their chessboard to further divide America. So I think what you have to do is you have to find the simplest, truest story that sounds true to them and then walk them through what's not true, what's objectively not true. And once people know that they've been lied to, they'll never walk back to that source of information or that well. Once they know the well is poisoned, they're on to their game, and then they begin their journey on DuckDuckGo.com or Google, and they start realizing, like, wow.
Start following you on Twitter. Yeah, and then that's what's happening. But don't you know, we're getting the most beautiful people in the world. I always say my mission has been to conserve liberalism. That's my mission. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to conserve liberalism, and I use liberalism in the way Milton Friedman used the word liberalism: freedom of speech, diversity of thought, freedom of religion, private property rights, Second Amendment. And we are starting to see the most beautiful people from the left. They give us their best, and we give them our worst. I think, yeah. And maybe that's, I want to get to your numbers and to your worksheet. But before we do that, again, talking about giving them, we get the best for our worst. It seems like the right-leaning Karens went for Biden, but a lot of Black and Latino men came over for Trump.
Yep.
And that might be the biggest story of this election cycle. And do you have any thoughts on that? Did you see that coming?
Well, I mean, it was actually on our show with Dr. Taylor Marshall. We were on for a long time, but I said that's the only way that Biden wins. I was like, if Trump somehow gets more than the Hispanic vote, more of the Black vote, and then the Black vote turnout is actually down from where the Democrats wanted, but then they get the Karen vote, because we already knew that the senior meme that, Trump is 26 behind with seniors was a lie, or else we wouldn't have been polling even in Florida. So we knew that was a lie. Going into this election, it was actually the first election where I knew who the determining vote was going to be. And that was white women, and in particular college-educated white women, and then the turnout levels of the college-educated white women. And what I can't reconcile, and why this looks like fraud to me, is how do you win Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, and then some of these states you really have a problem in, like Arizona and Georgia? I mean, when you do a demographic breakdown, it just doesn't really make sense. How did that gap widen in Minnesota and not shrink It just doesn't make sense. There's a picture here that doesn't make sense. So you're telling me that Joe Biden underperformed with every other group, and Donald Trump got more votes than anybody else in American history, and Joe Biden just happened to be a little bit more popular, but only with this one group. I just really don't buy it. Are you telling me that the white Karens, these empaths, are so divergent from everyone else? So it's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I just saw an article before I hopped on with you that, you know, Donald Trump has the most diverse support of any Republican candidate since 1960. People crossed over, Democrats crossed over to vote for him. And so I don't buy it. Joe Biden is the top vote getter in American history. Does that sound like
no one believes? No one believes that. When Biden won the nomination, my friends who were Democrats, because I have a lot of friends that are Bernie bros and were big Tulsi Gabbard, and I've been a long time anti-war conservative, so I have a lot of friends that are, you know, around the Tulsi campaign and Bernie bros. They broke down crying, and then they were even more distraught when he picked Kamala. So do I really believe that Joe Biden got more votes than Barack Obama?
Right. No. And that's the argument we need to use. It's truly, I do not believe it. I actively do not believe it. He just happened to perform. Donald Trump beat Donald Trump. And then Biden beats Obama and Hillary and Trump. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They didn't have, Jason, how did a candidate get more votes than anyone in history, including Donald Trump, who got more votes than anyone in history, and not host any campaign rallies, get fewer YouTube views and Periscope views? And then it was discovered that they were propped up by on their Twitter accounts with an Indian bot farm. So Donald Trump is getting more organic retweets, and he's more censored. Something's very wrong here, and I don't think the American people are ready to shut up, and I think that that's why we're alerting them by throwing these Stop the Steal rallies. We're in 6 states, and we're in 4 tonight.
So I follow you on Twitter, and we'll put that in the show notes. How do people find out where to go for these Stop the Steal rallies?
Okay, so, I can't trust the Republican Party, and Donald Trump is surrounded by incompetent people. So we launched stopthesteal.us. You can plug in your information if you're anywhere around Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia. We want to put you with other patriots, other professionals who have never protested, never gone to a rally, but are concerned about their democracy. Our friend Dr. Taylor Marshall says, take up space. And we're taking up space because what we have learned is that it's kind of funny. When you show up, bureaucrats' behavior changes, whether it's the IRS, whether it's the people counting your ballots, whether it's the people at the DOD or the White House. People's behavior changes when citizens are eagerly interested in how these policies are implemented. And so we've teamed up with some big names, people who have been very popular under the Donald Trump administration, and we're sending influencers everywhere. We're sending them and coupling them with political operatives. And we are watching like a hawk, and we don't care if the state is cold. The media doesn't get that job. We want our votes recounted.
Yeah, Biden said it's the people's job to say who wins.
Right.
Not his job, not the media's job. It's the voters' jobs.
My job, your job,
all of our jobs.
We the people. So, and that's going to make a democracy great. That's going to make a republic great. When you and I are participating in a way that we really thought that these politicians and bureaucrats had a handle on it. What's clear is that they don't. And so even if Democrats listening to this want to inspire confidence in the decision that they believe that Biden won, they should want Republicans to scrutinize these ballots. If you really think that you got more votes than anyone in history, show them to us, so that we can see that you were the winner and we can go together in peace and we'll duke this out in 4 years.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, the governor is saying that it would be inappropriate for Republicans to be there to watch the count. Why would that be inappropriate? I don't know if you saw this video. It's really unbelievable. Where Republican poll watchers were not allowed in. and other places where they illegally covered the window so people couldn't see what was going on where they were counting the ballots. This has been
unbelievable.
So I'm looking, this is the calls I've been getting all day, and this is what you're the guy that's going to have the answers. I'm looking at your election worksheet, and so when we do the recounts, which states are you certain that Trump won?
Well, I'm not certain that I think he won Pennsylvania. I think that if they had won Pennsylvania, if the son of Scranton had won the popular vote in Pennsylvania, we would have already known. They did. They stopped. They had no in-person early voting. Okay, so this was all mail-in voting where you just go slip it in a box. They should have blown us out in Pennsylvania when the polls started tightening. When Trump's campaign sent his Iowa staff to couple with his Pennsylvania staff, when Biden sent and doubled his reinforcements in Pennsylvania, I knew it was really close. And look, it was Biden's to lose. He's the son of Scranton. And he runs his nonprofit out of there. You know, they got $70 million from the Chinese government there. And so it was his to lose. So I think that Trump won Pennsylvania. I think Trump also won Michigan. There's a big problem with this Michigan stuff. It's super weird. The black vote was not enthused about Biden. And then the two states that just strike me as odd, the counts are Wisconsin and Minnesota. For Biden to grow like that, it would have been reflected in Iowa or Florida or somewhere else. And it doesn't look like that. So something funny's going on. But I think Michigan and Pennsylvania, and I actually think that the AP and Fox News have called Arizona, but no other media outlet has. I'm hearing on the ground they're very confident that Trump won Arizona, and I think that Fox News and the AP are going to have to eat crow. And the reason why Fox News is not calling Nevada is because that would give them on the Fox News map 270, and they'd have to declare Biden the president-elect. So they know they messed up by calling Arizona, and they're pridefully holding on to it for dear life. And I think it's going to be pretty embarrassing for Fox News when it comes out that Trump actually won Arizona.
And there seems to be just more shenanigans in Arizona than anywhere else, but maybe Michigan or Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin was wild too.
Yeah. But look, this is what happened in 2018 too. And unfortunately, you know, I'm not a big fan of Governor Ducey there. He shut down the state party when they tried to do a recount effort or an examination effort in 2018. So Martha McSally lost in 2018, and then she lost in 2020. You know, anyone could see that coming. And but there was some weird stuff with the ballot, and the state party really wanted to challenge it, and the governor shut it down and said Republicans were being wacko. And now he's changed his tune. But to me, it's much more the same. I warned and begged my party against this in 2018, and now it's become the entire election. You know, imagine just watching this in Florida, and I'm like, this is a test run. This is a test run for 2020. And I did not know. We're living in my nightmare, Jason. We're living in my nightmare. This is my complete nightmare. The system sucks. It doesn't work. You know, I'd rather have a new election in some of these states than even do a recount, to be honest.
Well, people are talking about that. Do you think that's possible?
I think it's pretty difficult. But if you can demonstrate a lot of fraud, then a judge can actually order a new election. And look, why are their judges allowed to be the most, you know, what's the word I'm looking for, rambunctious ones? Why can't ours do the same? And so we're in a new period of time. I think that the right and the left have both accepted that. And the right just needs to get bolder by what new means. And I'd like a new election in some of these states.
You know, I think this is chickens coming home to roost because, listen, everyone listening knows. I'm from Chicago. It's a joke to us. We know how corrupt politics is in Chicago. There was no doubt about it. We knew about it. It was the status quo in Pennsylvania and Baltimore, where Nancy Pelosi is from. This is normal. This is what it is. This is what is it? This is their operating procedures.
Mm-hmm.
But But are they being like dumb criminals? Should they have stuck to controlling the cities through corruption, but now this ambition to consume our entire nation with the corrupt politics that we usually associate with only Boston, Chicago, Philly, New York?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this what we're seeing? They cut their teeth on these big cities for decades, and now they've swallowed the country.
Right, I think you're right. Unfortunately for you and me and the voters of this election, I'm nervous that we're right in the middle. We're right in the middle of it. Too much corruption. Pride comes before the fall, but the fall might be 4 to 8 years away. And the damage that they'll be able to do around the world, is going to be pretty devastating. Can't be overstated. And another way to understand this, in my mind at least, and why I don't want to get used to it, is that, just think of it this way. Technology's never been what it is. Information and access to it has never been what it is. It's okay to admit that there's been no other time in history like this, that there has and that there hasn't. The capability for destruction by one person or one bad executive order is astronomical. It's true. And the suffering that I think will happen under a Biden-Harris administration cannot be understated. I mean, Barack Obama set the Middle East on fire, on absolute fire. And it took Donald Trump a short time to put it out.
Oh, I don't know if you know this. I went and documented Iraq in the wake of ISIS. Followed the Peshmerga from city to city. And the worst, I don't even like saying it out loud, but the worst memory of my life is going into a village that ISIS had just been pushed out and smelling the most horrible smell in the world. And I asked what that smell was. And they said, that's human flesh. We couldn't get the people out of the buildings that ISIS set on fire because they're booby-trapped. And everyone I talked to on the ground said this is the result of the Obama/Biden foreign policy, the JV team. And then we know that Joe Biden's brother, James, got a $1.5 billion contract to rebuild Iraq and didn't send a porta potty. That's real human suffering, ethnic cleansing, genocide. But again, the left, our liberal friends don't know about. They don't know about the over 1,000 children that died in Obama drone strikes.
Right.
From Yemen to Pakistan, the children that lost their hair because the drone strikes were so relentless, the children were so stressed and addled that there were villages where all the children were bald from stress. And those Uyghur concentration camps, I believe, will turn into Uyghur death camps. The New York Times, the mainstream media already don't cover it. For about 6 months, Facebook wouldn't allow me to publish anything on the Uyghur. Anything that had the word Uyghur in it was violation of terms of service.
That's stunning.
It's unbelievable. It's like you look at it and you're like, I don't believe this. How did we go from never again? Facebook says that anti-Semitism isn't allowed on Facebook. That's great. Yet we're not allowed to talk about the worst genocide since the Holocaust. It's forbidden to even discuss it, to share articles on the Uyghur.
It's something else. And what you realize, again, watching some of these issues pretty closely is, look, they did the Coney 2012 thing or whatever. And it's like, this is not a war against us alone. This is not a war against, for example, Christians alone, or conservatives alone, or capitalists alone. This is a war against any perception of truth. Anything that would challenge the Fortune 500 companies and their pipeline for plastic goods you use, I use, maybe we shouldn't be using. And I don't want to say it's us versus them, but we have oligarchs in this country. Or Hunter Biden would be in prison right now. And so, I'm troubled by this, but for it to get to the point where they feel like they can steal an election in plain sight means that, yes, they've become way too prideful. Yes, their destruction is coming, but boy, they're going to drag down a lot of innocents with them.
Now, was this stolen election a crime of choice or a crime of necessity?
There's a billion-dollar question. I think necessity. I think, especially after what we saw from Hunter Biden and Jim Biden, and as we're examining Joe Biden's role in all of this, actually, as kind of the patriarch of the criminal enterprise.
The big guy.
And he wants his tithing money. I think, you had to steal it. And that's, I was on the phone and I've been kind of hesitant about sharing this, but, someone said, what lengths will they go to? And I said, well, it looks like any. It looks like any now, because not only are they willing to steal an election, which is, immoral, and they did a bunch of unethical things leading up to the election, but they're willing to do it in plain sight. And there's a question of force coming up very soon, and society's going to have to answer it. And the problem is, like I said, with technology and information, and then urbanization, which we haven't talked about, is it just gets real nasty. Some of the places you were talking about, I mean, if we experience civil strife, urban warfare just looks really nasty. It's just really, really confusing, nasty, and there's all kinds of problems that come with it that really don't come with traditional forms of war or even civil war. And so I think they're willing to burn down the whole system. They're literally willing to burn down the whole system to protect some people from prosecution, and that's the beginning of it. There's speculation on what else they're hiding, but they're definitely hiding something else. And why would you need to protect Hunter Biden from prosecution? Well, maybe the same reason you protected Jeffrey Epstein, and you let him get caught and see what he did or said or whatever until he needed to go away too. And these people are very patient people. That's what we've learned, is that their conspiracy is covered up through patience. And we don't know what other crimes they're willing to entirely throw us into anarchy over, but they must be big.
Well, they were willing to turn Iraq into a hellhole, to turn Libya into an open-air slave market. They did their best to destroy Syria, knowing full well that it would have led to 800,000 dead and displaced Christians, Alawites, and other minorities. So they know that. The New York Times knows. The New York Times knows 3 million Uyghur are in concentration camps, yet they choose not to report on it. They know that we're on the verge of the greatest famine since World War II because of the COVID lockdowns, and they choose to report on it sporadically, which to me makes it even worse. Like, you're going to put it on B17 on a Wednesday. I'd rather you not report it at all than I could imagine you didn't believe in it. But when you actually put it in your newspaper and you haven't assigned an editor to it and say, you know what, from now until we get through this, we're going to talk about food insecurity every single day in this paper, and often on the front page. So that is the sorrow of what we're dealing with. I don't want to take up your whole night. So your election night worksheet was great, and I meant to pay for it, but you gave it to me, and I said I was going to pay for it. So I was a liar.
No, it's a gift.
I was a liar there. But now we're looking at it. You said something. You said it might be 4 to 8 years before chickens come home to roost for the neoliberals. Are you saying that Trump might not pull this out?
Well, that was a good catch. I think that things are really challenging because, like I said, if we assume that everything I said I believe, and that's that the Democrats are willing to use force against us, and the Democrats are willing to use force against the president, that's when you exit politics and you enter the state of nature, and then for nation states and people living near each other, that's a state of war. If they're willing to do that, that means when they get caught, they just will refuse to relieve themselves of the positions of power. And then when we attempt to detain them, they'll attempt to use force, let's just say. And so are we willing to go there with them? No, I don't think so. I don't think that the right is willing to give the left what they're saying. And they're willing to one-up us until that horrible, horrible, horrible line. And I don't think until this is what I'm looking for, okay, as a lover of history, is when we start having these conversations about absolute moral justification, not this psychological term, which is a hoax, but when we say, hey, we cannot live under tyranny. Hey, they can, I can't participate in the system that does this. When it becomes less about resistance and more about objection, then there's certain moral obligations that we have on the right. And because that conversation isn't really happening on the right, what that tells me is that we're willing to suffer a lot more. And my friend, the left knows it. The left absolutely knows it. And they're going to abuse us until we snap. And I think that is, written in stone, it looks like. And because here I watched the debate. I watched the prefiguration of this in 2018, and here we are in all of its glory. The Democrats are not going to back down from it. So I think we really just have to question the fortitude of the public that backs Trump, and I think that's softer than the institutional kind of spell casting, repetitive thing that they got going on the left.
Yeah, and that's why your rallies are so important. I think I started the story earlier. I was watching my sons play tennis today, and I was scowling. My wife says, honey, whenever we're at a party, she's like, you don't like that person, do you? And I'm like, why would you ask that? She goes, because when you look at someone you don't like, it just shines right through. And I was listening to these guys, and I'm like, really? I thought I was hiding it very well. She's like, no, you don't hide it well at all. So I was at the tennis court watching, and I feel very uncomfortable at tennis courts anyway. I'm more used to boxing gyms. And I'm watching my boys play tennis because their mom wants them to play tennis. And I'm listening to these men who are tennis players, God bless them. They're all sitting around kvetching about the election. And they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And I'm thinking, you're not going to do. And so I was just looking at them like, you're not going to do anything. And then one of the guys said, I'm going to sell my business. I'm going to retire. I'm done. I think Atlas shrugging is all we have to worry about. People are going, I can live my quality of life and, sail out into the sunset or ride my horse out in the sunset, live happily ever after. And that's my big concern. Like, we have an obligation to pass this republic on to our posterity. We need to be thoughtful to our children. We don't need a reverse mortgage loan on our name. I think what we've done is we've just taken out a reverse mortgage loan on our country so that we can spend every dollar we've made in our life and leave nothing to our children and our posterity. That's my great concern. And so I hope we can wake people up. My article tomorrow at the stream is we have two choices. We can be Harrison Bergeron's father, or we can be Harrison Bergeron. I don't know if you're familiar with the Kurt Vonnegut short story, but
I'm not.
It's set in this dystopian future where if you're good looking, they make you wear a mask. If you're intelligent, you have to wear an earpiece that disrupts your thought. If you're an athlete, they maim you or they burden you with sandbag shackles. And this boy, there's a great short film that stars Armie Hammer, who plays Harrison. But the more more weight you put on him, the stronger he gets. The more you try to disrupt his thought, the more powerful his thinking becomes. And so they have to imprison him, but he escapes. And all he wants to do is dance once with a beautiful woman. And he goes to this theater where the women are all shackled and forced to dance with chains wearing a mask. And it's the only television program. And he is able to break her shackles and take off her mask. And he has one beautiful dance with her. And they kiss. And then these totalitarian police kill him. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, his own father's watching this. But he's got his earpiece disrupting his thought. And he can't really recognize his own son, and all he does all day, every day is stare at the television and drink beer. So that's our choice, right? Like we have to decide, am I going to just retreat, be a clever person and make my own way, come home and watch Cobra Kai on YouTube or Netflix or wherever it is next season, and make my way with the privileges that I've been given to have a college education and make a good living for myself? Or am I willing to sacrifice my comfort, my security, my prosperity for our posterity? See, that's my big fear, is that there's not going to be enough people who are willing to sacrifice. And we'll just be lulled into sleep, sign that reverse mortgage for our nation. And by the time you and I are old men, we'll be living in the Soviet Union.
It's possible. And it's always the minority, though, that's willing to participate in any type of revolution, whether it's cultural, ideological, spiritual, or otherwise. And this is the test for you and I. Will our words and our convictions and our actions reflect what we believe, and will they inspire other men to take up the cause with us? And so I think that that's what's before us right now is can our sacrifices serve as inspiration for others to do likewise? And I think we got a shot at that. And that's where we need to be.
So what you're saying is we should be Harrison Bergeron.
Yes.
We should dance. That's one of my I have these spiritual exercises I've designed. And one of them is when I go to sleep, I'll think of different religious traditions and their worldviews and their sort of their understanding of God, man, and the world. And I'll try to think about me, my family, my society through those traditions. And one of them, is a Christian Catholic, but I'll even, I'll lie in bed and say, okay, what if there is no God? What if the universe is just cold and dark and empty and everything is meaningless? And I lie in bed and I think, well, how would I want to live my life? And I say, you know what? Then I would want to dance a life, a beautiful life, and strut and show off in front of this big, cold, dark nothingness. And just, I think the most beautiful way to do that is to live a life serving the vulnerable, reaching down, helping other people up who haven't been as privileged. And of course, no one is less privileged than our yet to be born posterity that are going to suffer the consequences or reap the blessings of how we live our life.
Yep.
All right. So what are your last words for the folks that they're surfing? They've got 3 computers on. They've got Fox News on. They're watching Steve Bannon on the War Room. Steve, before you give us your last thought, Steve has been saying over and over again for weeks, Donald Trump will not let this election be stolen from him.
Right.
Do you believe that?
I think that Steve was serving as an encourager-in-chief to our commander-in-chief. And when he said that, it sounded more like an affirmation than a conviction. And, I sometimes, I like playing the analyst role, and sometimes I hate it. But that's what I think is going on there, because the fact that the lawsuits that were filed this afternoon weren't filed last night means it wasn't something that they were prepared for. That's not encouraging. The language that is coming out of Trump's mouth and Republicans is not encouraging. And then there's some other things that aren't very encouraging, which is why I think a lot of us are just stepping up organically. So what I would say, kind of with my last words, is that we got to go from online to offline. And we have to remember the impact that we have when we're with one another, sweating the heat, chilly in the cold, but doing something that means something, really, really means something. And so if you want to be a part of something that means something offline with all your online friends, then go to stopthesteal.us, sign up. You can pray with us. You can volunteer in a state with us if you're nearby. There's all kinds of research items, and we're going to keep everybody alerted. We have to bypass the mainstream media because, again, they're controlling. How do you know what you know? And what we're seeking to do is make and create more objective standards that everybody can agree on, even when you lose. And that's what we're trying to do. And so, but I hope that the president is filled with God's strength in all of this and God's resolve, and that speaking the truth falls on receptive ears of the American public, because there's no one in my position who would tell Donald Trump to say the truth boldly, because we don't believe that the public is ready for it. And the public's probably not. We need some miraculous transformation of how people hear the truth. And that's that this election probably was stolen. Just like JFK versus Nixon. That election was stolen. And for the good of the quote country, Nixon decided to go away for a little while and concede the election that he won.
Yeah, I like that, going from online to offline to we need to get out there and shoulder this burden. And Ali, you know what? I know of you through friends of mine in the media, friends of mine working in the White House. You have a lot of admirers in places of influence, and so they're hearing your voice. And I really hope that your advice is followed. And we need the truth now, because I believe if we let them steal this election, after being trapped in our houses and having the economy shut down for 6 months and all the damage that has done, that I can't imagine we will ever, I don't want to say that, but that we're going to have to dig ourselves out of a deep hole. And it is going to be, it's going to take a great struggle and force of will to ever have a national election that's legitimate again. And that is really what is at stake.
You're absolutely right. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with your audience. I know there are many influential friends that we have who, rely on your conviction and your courage for fighting for the vulnerable. And they believe it when you say it, Jason.
You know, I hate, Ali, that I have to even talk about this issue, election security, free speech. You know, these. Right. Why am I talking about these things? Right. It's not my job, but the way you put it earlier, that this election is going to, the results, the real sorrow, that's the folks that are going to really suffer from this election are living on the other side of the world and never even had a say in it. And that's the great sorrow. And that's the mission of my organization. And that's why I even founded this podcast. This podcast was a way I joked when I first founded it. I'm going to try to be winsome, funny, and entertaining. And when you're not when you're not paying attention, I'm going to slip in some of the most sorrowful issues in the world you don't want to pay attention to, like genocides, democides, and wars. And that's really the mission of my apostolate, and that's been the mission of this podcast. And it's sorrowful to me that I even have to talk about this, but I agree with you that in doing this, I'm standing with the Kurds. I'm standing with the child in the womb here in the United States, and I'm standing with the Uyghur. And that's what's at stake. We're getting people all over the world messaging me that they're praying for this election. And
we need them.
That they're afraid where they are in the world. They're fearful. And they're praying for President Trump. So, brother, I'm going to check out where all of your rallies are, and I'll be traveling again starting next week, and I hope to bump into you at one of those rallies.
I hope so. I think I'm going to be quarterbacking a lot of these from the great state of Texas, but we have absolutely salt of the earth people there, and I'd love for you to address one of these rallies while you're traveling. It's a very organic effort, and we're occupying space. We're letting our bureaucrats know, hey, we're your boss, and we're here.
Boom, we're your boss. Where's the best place for people to follow you?
Twitter.com/Ali, or go to, if you're not on Twitter, go to alialexander.org. We do some fun analysis. It's a mix of political outcomes and weird spiritual stuff, I'm thinking, and personality, comedy. I'm a bit of a cursing Christian, working on it. But we just have a lot of fun with the founders community over at alialexander.org.
And then Periscope. How do they follow you on Periscope?
If they have the Periscope app, it's the sister app to Twitter. You can go to periscope.tv/AliScopes, or you in the Periscope app, type in Ali Alexander, and maybe they have me shadow banned there, maybe they don't. But Yeah, I do live. It's weird. I don't consider myself a live streamer, but I live stream every day in between, whatever it is I do for a living. And we have a lot of fun in that community. And it may take one or two streams for you to get used to the pace, but we have a lot of fun. It's very informative. And I think that I have the most concentrated activist base in the country. We make phone calls. We donate to underdog candidates. We do everything that we do together, and we make a huge impact that way.
You're a machine. All right, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, God bless.
Bless.
All right, guys. You got to follow Ali. You can jump off, bro.
Thanks.
All right, God bless. You guys have to follow Ali. He's someone I admire, and I think he's an example to all of us. And I just want to wrap it up with this. You know, when I work on a lot of campaigns. I've worked on campaigns every cycle since 1994, and I got out of the Army in 1993, and I joined the Army the day I turned 17. So basically, I have worked every election cycle, either as a volunteer or as in a leadership position, paid staffer. And I'm going to be honest, no one has ever worked harder on a political campaign than I work on. I work hard. People who've worked with me say I'm a machine. And when I've been on campaigns, when we lose, people cry, they're heartbroken, and they're often offended by how little I seem impacted. And when I say I'm not impacted at all, when we win, you don't see me jumping around, strutting, because to me, it's just a play and a series of downs. Each election is just a play and a series of downs. I have a very narrow mission. It is usually right above my desk, but it's not today because I just had my new office built. And it simply says, protect the vulnerable from violence and inspire solidarity with the vulnerable. Promote the incomparable beauty of the human person and inspire solidarity with the vulnerable to advance the interests of the vulnerable. That's my mission. And each campaign is an opportunity to do that. So in 2016, when I was a surrogate for Ted Cruz, I was able to use that position to get an Iraqi priest on a private plane to go to the debate in, I think it was Houston, and to hand a personal letter to all of the candidates from his bishop in Iraq on the needs of Christians in Iraq. And he was able to give it to Donald Trump and every other Republican running. And so I use campaigns to advance the interests of the vulnerable, hoping from the child in the womb beyond, and hoping that those candidates, when elected, will serve that purpose, but just the campaign in and of itself can serve that purpose. Same thing with movies. Some of my movies are a success, some aren't, and people will be shocked that I'm not traumatized if a film doesn't pop, but I'm always just very happy at the marketing campaign in and of itself, the film festival campaign in and of itself, all the publicity and earned media and paid advertising, all of that to me is as important as the film. So what's my point on all this? I'm the last guy that's going to be heartbroken if Donald Trump lost. I wrote all these articles, traveled even around the country during COVID. If we left it all on the field, and I think his campaign did an amazing job, and the American people went the other direction, so be it. So for me to be really this upset, and I don't think I'm communicating how upset I am, trust me. If you could feel what the rage inside of me. It's not that we lost or that we're going to lose, because we don't know. But that the only way we can lose is the election was stolen from us right before our very eyes. And they know, or they anticipate, that we will do nothing about it. So I was reflecting on this today. Okay, how am I, in my little boat, my little mission, my little apostolate, how am I to respond to this? And I always look back to St. Pope John Paul II is someone I greatly admire. You know, Carol Wojtyła was his name before becoming, that's his name. And He's Polish. And when you think of his life and what he experienced as a young man, just not only the personal tragedy in his family, but the Nazis invading Poland when he was a young man, very young man, and how devastating that was. And then when the Nazis vanished, the 1,000-year Reich vanishes, 13 years, the Soviets come in right after them. Now he's elevated to the papacy. He's in Rome. He's on the cover of Time. Yada, yada, yada. He's shot. He's shot. This was his life. Yet, he published some of the most influential books of all time, like Love and Responsibility, powerful encyclicals like Evangelium Vitae, plays. He wrote plays as a young man, beautiful plays. And so there is nothing that can stop our work to leave our posterity a culture of life. Our great challenge, or at least mine, is not to be swept away in sort of this mimetic contagion, not to be overwhelmed with rage and anger, which for me is a great challenge, but to be thoughtful in how I'm going to direct my actions going forward, to do what it is my simple mission to do, which is really just every human being's mission. It's my vocation. We all do it, right? You do it. If you're a dentist, you do that in a very important way, because I can't imagine a better, more important job in the world. I heard once, I don't know if it's true, but 50% of people have a toothache 50% of their life. So thank God for dentistry here in the United States, right? So when we live out whatever our vocation is, of course, we're showing love for our neighbor. But mine is a very unusual one. That's very specifically what we do at Movie to Movement, right? We make movies, and through the Vulnerable People Project, we run aggressive influence campaigns. So although this is a startling act, a coup, tyrannical, unimaginable, right? But yet, I just have to be thoughtful. Like Kira Wottiwa, St. John Paul the Great, or I'm going to give you one more story because I'm looking at him. Maximilian Kolbe. He was a priest in Poland as well. He had a zeal. He was a missionary, lost a lung in India to tuberculosis, went to Japan, built a church in Nagasaki that miraculously was untouched, and the friars inside survived the dropping of the atomic bomb on that ancient Catholic city of Nagasaki that was in Japan. It was the Catholic city. He went all over the world. He dreamt of space travel. He loved radio. He was the first Christian radio broadcaster in the world. He had a newspaper. He was a man of action. He loved science, you know. His sketches I have all of his notes and books. Anything that's ever been published on him, I actually have all of his writings that have been translated, and sketches of his where he would draw. He had plans for rocket ships to go to the moon that he'd sketched out in the 20s, you know. But he was a man of action. In fact, he wrestled with, should he become a priest or a soldier, because he really wanted to fight the Russians at one point in his life. So that was what he was torn between, the life of a priest and the life of a soldier. So how did he live his life in the face of tyranny? Well, he came back from Japan to his monastery in Poland, where he oversaw the publication of an anti-Nazi newspaper. I think it was the largest newspaper in Europe at the time, the largest distribution of any newspaper in Europe at the time. Maybe it was the largest distribution of any Polish newspaper. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But so he was doing that. So when the Nazis invaded Poland, what was the very first thing that he did? Or the Nazis did, was they arrested him. But because of his great fame and influence, they released him. But then it was soon discovered that he was hiding Jews in his monastery. He was rearrested, sent to Auschwitz, and a prisoner escaped. And so the rule of 10, the Nazis demanded that for every prisoner that escaped, they would kill 10 prisoners, the rule of 10. And so they pulled 10 prisoners out to die, and one of the men just began to sob that he was a father, and they couldn't kill him because he needed to care for his family. And so this priest, Maximilian Kolbe, raises his hand and says, I have no wife, I have no children, I'll die in this place. So they threw him in a starvation bunker, and for 10 days they didn't feed him. The other men in the bunker were Jewish, and so they sang the Psalms together. At his canonization, he was canonized a saint. Nazis that were there and other prisoners said that normally there would be wailing from the starvation bunker, but with Maximilian Kolbe and the other prisoners, they sang the Psalms together every day. And every day that would be fainter and fainter, and there'd be fewer voices and fewer voices. Until now there was only one voice, and that was the voice of Maximilian Kolbe, already frail with one lung. He also often would, the little bit of bread that he would be given, and some guards would smuggle him in some wine, and he would consecrate it and celebrate Mass when he could, and communion for some of the other prisoners. So he was already more frail, only one lung, but yet he lived the 10 days. Now the Psalms went to the Hail Marys, the Rosary. This became obnoxious for the Nazis, and so they pulled him out on August 13th, 1941, and they injected him with carbolic acid, threw him back into the bunker. He didn't die, and they pulled him out again. And then on August 14th, the eve of the Catholic feast of the Assumption of Mary, they injected him again with carbolic acid, and then on the eve of the Assumption, he died. So why do I share that story with you? That in our lifetime, in the lifetimes of people listening, countries that were civilized, that were beautiful, unspeakable tyranny came. And beautiful men and women lived heroic and beautiful and productive lives. They wrote poems, plays. Kirill Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II, would put on plays that celebrated Polish and Christian culture under the noses of the Nazis. It was forbidden. And so we should never despair and just look at all these as opportunities through God's grace to live beautiful and heroic lives. And I think only then, when we look to men like Maximilian Kolbe and others, Father Jerzy Popescu was a priest that stood up to the Soviet Union and launched the Solidarity movement. He was beaten by the KGB, thrown into a river, an icy river, beaten to death and then thrown into an icy river. But we can look to men like that, say we can be heroic. Now, some of you are thinking, why are you being so dramatic? It's not going to come to that. It has come to that, though, really. The COVID shutdowns, the ham-fisted shutdowns, you didn't suffer the consequences, but the slowdown in global food production and distribution is leading to food riots in Nigeria, countless millions on the verge of starvation, a complete and utter blackout on what is happening to the Uyghur in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan, the eruption of anti-Christian violence in Nigeria, and the recent violence, the extremist Islamist violence in Europe. And so there are those of you who are like, you're being so dramatic, and then I hear other people say, oh, it's hopeless. This is such a confusing time. It's never been this wicked, and it's never been this evil. It's never been this strange. And I will say that what we're experiencing now happens time and time and time and time and time again in human history. The only thing that is new is the size of the polity, is the size of the political community. And now it's the globalists with their reset, their transnational organizations. It must have been as startling in Germany with in Italy with the wars of unification, right? When they went from smaller and smaller polities to larger and larger political communities. Each time it must have seemed so strange and so Orwellian. And that's all. So it's really just the same thing. In fact, I think of Biden a lot because I read Plato and Aristotle. That's like my solace. And in Aristotle's Politics, he says, he talks about the tyrant, the man his avarice, the old man whose avarice is so uncontrollable that being a man of private life cannot even satisfy his desires, that only public life, only harnessing the power of the state can fulfill one's avarice. And that sorrowful letter of all those, the Hunter Biden thing, I honestly pity Hunter Biden. Now, Nietzsche said that pity is really the worst thing you can have. Pity is the worst thing you can have on a person. And I guess none of us want to be pitied, right? And I don't pity someone because they're poor. I don't pity someone because they're sick. I don't pity someone for those, you don't pity anyone for that, but you do pity someone who's lived a tragic, ignoble life. And that's Hunter Biden. But we can see how he got there, and it's really sorrowful. But in the one letter he left to his father, oh my gosh, that we saw in the hard drives, the one that was heartbreaking is like, when are we going to stop all this? Don't we have enough money? When you look at the numbers of those deals, in the tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then the $1.5 billion deal James Biden had in Iraq, you're like, how much money do you need? And of course, that's money that they want to turn into power, but I've never really understood the desire for power. And I think about power a lot. I'm always trying to think of ways to leverage friendships with people in elected office or government agencies or in the media. How do I get my friend who's a producer at Fox News to do a special package on the Uyghur? How do I get my buddy at Al Jazeera to talk about this or that? I do think about that a lot. That's my interest in it. And I'm not a noble maybe I'm just slothful. I look at them and I'm like, wow, they are really ambitious. Maybe I'm just utterly devoid of ambition. They are ambitious. I don't have that kind of ambition. But it is pitiful and very sorrowful. But I look to, I've digressed. I've looked to, I think of Biden a lot, like that quote from Aristotle, a man who's just so driven by avarice that only the state can satisfy him. And that's Joe Biden. And, that's the reality we're dealing with. But here's our goal, or at least my goal. My goal is to still try to knit together a community of beautiful people who want to live small so they can live large, who would rather spend their life serving the vulnerable, like the vulnerable are their master, than mastering the wealthy, being a cohort to the powerful. And so nothing changes. Whoever wins this election, nothing changes. We have to be thoughtful, disciplined, strategic, improve our tactics, pray for God's grace, and to be as committed as ever to the vulnerable. And I believe that if Joe Biden wins this election, we have our work cut out for us. We're going to have I'm going to end on this. I'm going to end on this, guys, because I've just been meandering. I am going to end on this. We're launching a new campaign, and it's going to be the Great Campaign. The Vulnerable People Project and Movie to Movement are launching the Great Campaign to defeat the Great Reset. And I think the single most, and of course it's going to have our 5 principles, right? Do you know, do I talk about them enough on the show? I don't know. The 5 principles to defeating the Great Reset are the 5 principles of a humane political community. They don't change. Number 1, it's promoting the incomparable dignity of the human person and to make sure laws acknowledge that dignity and protect the vulnerable, the human person, from violence. 2, to promote the transcendent moral order that there's a justice, there's a law above the laws of man. And this talk of packing the court, for example, by Joe Biden, which he will pack the court if he can, he will. This is a complete embrace of positivism. When you have this huge court, they are effectively become a legislative body. Well, that's what they want, really. They just should abolish the Supreme Court. They truly believe that when the legislature says something is right, it is right. In our documentary, Divided Hearts of America, Senator Kruger from New York said, we don't recognize a right to life to the fetus, so there is no right to life for the fetus because the laws of New York don't recognize that. Duh, dummy. Don't you know? No, we know something different. As the Reverend Martin Luther King would say, there's a law above the laws of man. Our job is to get the laws of man to conform to that transcendent moral order. That's our job. Number 3, this is the most important one right now. Subsidiarity. Subsidiarity. That we break the stranglehold of distant, unelected powers on our communities. I call it think local, act local, or think local, fight global. And we need to fight these globalist organizations that control us. For example, the World Health Organization is why you've got a mask on that was designed to keep bacteria from going into wounds as surgeons perform their job, not viruses coming in and out of those masks. And a new study shows they are completely useless and irrelevant to stopping the COVID virus. But the WHO dictates that you, wherever you are living, whether you live in Iraq, whether you live in Kenya, whether you live in Mililani. By the way, Mililani is last week was our number 1 city. It's unbelievable how many people are listening to this podcast in Mililani. But we're breaking records everywhere. By the way, we entered the top 100 in like 5 countries, and we added the Czech Republic. Aloha, everyone in the Czech Republic. But what subsidiarity says is Twitter cannot control how I talk to my neighbors and my family and my friends. What we say to each other and how we say to each other, we're responsible for that. We don't need you fact check. Could you imagine if you were having a barbecue and some guy from Silicon Valley was fact checking you and your friends every time you tried to open your mouth? And the only time he wanted to correct what you had to say was when you were saying an uncomfortable truth. The only things you are not allowed to say on social media are things that are true and dangerous. They should just say it's true but dangerous. Hunter laptop, true but dangerous. BLM stabs black activist, true but dangerous. Dangerous truth. That's what they should say. Fact check. So that's the first thing we need to do is get Twitter out of our private conversations and the World Health Organization out of our lives. And then in 4th, humane economy, a just social order is grounded in private property rights. If you can't keep the product of your labor, if you're not the king and queens of your castles, there's no freedom. In Hawaii, they were telling people you have to wear a mask in your house. You can't have your grandma and grandpa, your cousins and your nieces, your nephews over for Thanksgiving. Hey, pardon me, sorry, this is my castle. I am the king. Yeah, that's nice. Your grandma and grandpa don't have to come over for Thanksgiving. You and your wife can wear a mask in your house when you do the marital act. That's your business. Don't be sharing your opinions with me. And then the final one is the most important one too. I love each one of these truths, but it's solidarity. That the sufferings of life don't fall upon us equally, and there are people that are carrying far more than their fair share of the burden. Think of St. Jude's. St. Jude's, that's to me is a beautiful organization. Nothing to me is more traumatic? Would you rather live in a dystopian new world order with healthy children and a loving spouse, or live in the freest country and most prosperous country in the world, lonely and with a sick child? Think about that. Think about it. I would rather live in a dystopian future, trapped in my house with my loving wife and my children, playing foosball and reading Shakespeare's sonnets, because that's what we do. We're weird. We play foosball, then we read Shakespeare's sonnets, and talk about St. Bernadette. They're weird things. I'd rather do that than be alone because my marriage broke because of the trouble of, the sorrow and pain of caring for a child fighting some challenging illness, and be at St. Jude right now. So St. Jude is an example of an organization and people that are living their lives serving people, caring far more than their fair share of life suffering, solidarity. And we're going to need that if Joe Biden's president. But I'm going to wrap this up. I want to offer to anyone who's listening a copy of my book. And the best way to get a copy of my book, The Race to Save Our Century, where we go over these 5 whole life principles and also the 5 ideologies of evil that lead to genocide, democide, and total war. I want to give you a copy of my book. And the best way for me to do that is you just make a donation of $20 or more. I'd like to ask you to make become a $20 a month donor. If you can do that to the Vulnerable People Project, I'll send you a free copy of my book. But any donation, one time or monthly, of $20, you get a copy of my book. And we'll send that right off to you. We got some big news on the book. I might be turning into a documentary here pretty soon. The Race to Save Our Century, the documentary. So that's all. I didn't tell you how to get it. If you can't tell, I haven't slept in 2 days. I stayed up all night. I watched that election. Then I took what was really an hour nap. And then I woke up because the kids were getting up, meant to nap. And like you, because you probably did the same thing, didn't. Was up all day. To make that donation, go to thegreatcampaign.org and make a $20 donation to the Vulnerable People Project, and we will send you a copy of the book. All right? We have some big guests. I hope they're lined up for this week, but one of them was supposed to be on yesterday, Steve Bannon, but he's getting so many big media hits. I demurred and said, I would rather you do those big media hits. We'll get you when we get you. So hopefully Steve's going to be coming on tomorrow. We're going to have some other big guests. But the line of gesture, the coverage of this present crisis coming from this show is, how do we stay focused on promoting the incomparable beauty of the human person and inspiring solidarity with the vulnerable when we ourselves, or at least me, are very angry? And maybe I'll get Gil Bailey. I've been wanting to get Gil Bailey on for the longest time. He's one of my favorite writers, and he writes a lot about these things. All right, so until next time, this has been the Jason Jones Show. Aloha.
This has been the Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.